I rise today to discuss an epidemic that is affecting our nation's youth. A crisis each and every parent should be concerned about, and one that so many parents I know already are. Our kids' worsening mental health is an emergency, and it's an emergency clearly and undeniably linked to social media. Emergency room visits among adolescents for anxiety, mood disorders, and self-harm have all risen dramatically in the years since social media apps exploded onto the scene. Over that same time period, and during the second decade of this century, rates of depression amongst teenagers more than doubled. By 2019, 20% of teenagers agreed with the notion that, quote, life often feels meaningless. Almost a 100% increase from a decade earlier. According to the CDC in 2021, and buckle up for this, 1 in 3 high school young women said she actually considered death by suicide. 25% of teenage girls made a plan to do so. 9% of high schoolers and 13% of teenage girls actually attempted death by suicide. As a mom, that is beyond horrifying. I worry for my own kids. I worry for their friends. And as a senator, I worry about the future of the next generation of Americans. To make matters worse, social media companies know the harm their platforms create. Instagram's parent company, Meta, conducted internal research that showed that 1/3 of teenage girls who use the app report it makes them feel worse, but they cannot stop. And while social media companies have taken some steps, it is clear that there is work for Congress to do. The last time a United States president signed a major piece of legislation addressing children and the internet was, wait for it, 1998. So you look almost 30 years ago, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act was signed into law. For reference, at that time that the law was signed, MySpace didn't even exist. It's time for an update, and there is a clear place to start. Studies have shown that the most damaging time for an adolescent to use social media is during their preteen years, and the 1998 law tried to address that. The law says that websites and other online services cannot collect personal information from children under 13 years old without parental consent. Now, the catch is that those websites have to know that the child is under 13. The standard minimum age for social media platforms is 13. But current law creates an obvious incentive for companies not to verify whether their users are old enough to be on the app. And because social media companies have to know that a child is under 13 for the law to apply, they simply choose not to verify this information. Look, anti-child sex abuse organization Thorn actually conducted a study in 2021 that showed that 49% of respondents between the ages of 9 and 12 years old said that they had used Instagram. 52% said they had used Facebook. 58% said that they had used Snapchat. And it was just last week in a Senate Judiciary hearing where I heard not one, but 2 parents tell about their painful story where their children had died of fentanyl poisoning from a pill that they had bought on Snapchat, thinking it was something else, thought they bought a Percocet, they thought they bought an oxycodone. It was laced with fentanyl, and now they're dead. 68% of these people in this survey between 9 and 12 years old said that they had used TikTok. The age limits social media companies claim they have mean absolutely nothing. That's why I introduced the Kids Off Social Media Act alongside Senators Ted Cruz, Chris Murphy, and Brian Schatz. The four of us approached this not as Democrats or Republicans, not as someone who sits on the right or the left, but as four concerned parents that are raising teenagers right now and dealing with this issue. Our bill would set a minimum age of 13 years old for social media platforms, but that's not the only thing that it would do. The Kids Off Social Media Act would also prevent platforms from feeding targeted content picked by an algorithm to users under the age of 17. For anyone who's curious about why that's in the bill, all you have to do is ask a teenager, especially a teenage girl. Former U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy wrote that nearly half of all adolescents say that social media makes them feel worse about their bodies. That doesn't seem like an accident. If you read, and many people have, Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, you will learn that these apps use algorithms that, quote, home in on and amplify girls' desires to be beautiful in socially prescribed ways, which includes being thin, end quote. Once the algorithms start feeding teenage girls images and videos of increasingly thin and unhealthy women, the vicious cycle begins. And those girls end up finding images or videos promoting anorexia or as Haidt says, emaciated young women urging their followers to try extreme diets like the, quote, corpse bride diet or the, quote, water-only diet. These algorithms on social media platforms are not just leading our daughters to starve themselves, they are leading them to torture themselves as well. By turning the Kids Off Social Media Act into law, we can put a stop to this. I am so grateful that Senator Ted Cruz from the great state of Texas prioritized our bill in the Commerce Committee. And I am sure that parents everywhere are grateful too. After all, parents overwhelmingly support our mission. A survey conducted by the Count on Mothers group showed that over 90% of mothers agreed that there should be a minimum age of 13 on social media platforms. And 87% of mothers agreed that social media companies should not be allowed to use personalized algorithms to deliver content to our children. Mr. President, if there has ever been a theme of the legislation that my colleagues and I have pursued so far this Congress, it is keeping American families and children safe. The Lake and Riley Act will help keep kids safe from criminal illegal aliens. The Halt Fentanyl Act, which I spoke about on this very floor just last week, will help kids be safe from deadly fentanyl and fentanyl poisonings. And the Kids Off Social Media Act will help keep kids safe from mental health effects that these platforms and their algorithms produce. There is nothing more important we can do as a body than protect the people we serve. So let's do it. Let's get the Kids Off Social Media Act through Congress and to the president's desk. There are parents across this country that are counting on us to step up, to put the proper guardrails in place so their children can be safe and their children have an opportunity to both explore and to succeed. All of our country's children are free to pursue their own American dream, just as our generations were, and this will enable them to do that. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.